Hi there, English 232. It's Miss Whistler. I hope you guys are having a great second part of the class. We're in Unit 2, which is World War I and World War II. So we are looking at the time period right around when World War I started, and then we are going through the end of World War II. And there is a ton of literature in this section because people were very impacted by what went on with World War I, the Great Depression, and then World War II. So I'm feeling a little better. I have somewhat of a voice. And so I'm going to go ahead and talk to you guys about what we're going to be doing in Unit 2, which is weeks 5 through 8, 9-ish. Okay. All right. So in terms of finishing up Unit 1 into Unit 2, you guys should be kind of finishing up your poster, your archetypal poster. I did extend the due date a week because I realized you kind of needed that. So it will be due week 6. So it's due 9/17 at midnight. Okay. So if you would post your poster in the think tank area so that I can give you guys some feedback, I'll be looking at that Wednesday and Thursday. And you can feel free to give each other feedback too. That's just a communal place for you guys to go in and say, wow, that's really cool. I like that. Or hey, did you think about this story? So that's what that place is for, is just to encourage you to conversate. But I'll go in there and give you guys some feedback before you turn it in for a grade. So that is there for you guys. So as we look at week 5, I tried to clean things up a little bit in terms of try to make things more clear. So I highlighted all the literature that is included in Unit 2. Okay, so I highlighted all of it. It's a lot of poetry. Poetry becomes a vehicle through which writers feel like they can speak. Remember World War I and World War II, there was a lot of political strife going on at that time. There were lots of Americans who left because they disagreed with, the American intervention in a lot of European affairs. And so a lot of writers felt very passionately about what was happening politically around the globe. And so poetry was just a good way for them to express themselves. And then we have the Harlem Renaissance, which was a time of African American creativity. We're going to take a look at some music, some artists, some paintings, but this was a decade, and some argue 2 decades, in which African Americans really exploded in terms of their creative juices. So we have the Harlem Renaissance, and we also have the women's movement of the 20s, which is when women were asserting themselves into society. And then we also have the modernist movement, which we will learn about. And modernism just deals with the impact of all of this, technology, all of this industry, all of this innovation, all of these events on the human species. And so those are kind of the things where we're going. And then the last week, we will do our novel discussion. So whether you are doing Little Princes or Americana, whichever one, there will be a discussion for both. I will be doing the discussion during virtual office hours, and I will record it. So I'll be spending 30 minutes on Little Princes and 30 minutes on Americana. And so I'll record it and then I'll post it so people can hop on and ask questions about the novel as you're reading it. So you should be starting the novel now so that you can kind of start making connections to the rest of the literature. And so that's there. And as usual, I have our introductory sort of things. There's the quiz. So if history is not your thing during this time, if you don't remember a whole lot in terms of what was happening in history, history always impacts, and social events always impact writers. There's also a timeline you could glance at. There's some maps. So those all influence what is going on. And then there is a retrospect by Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound led the Imagist movement, and so that just contains some of the rules of the Imagists. This was a radical shift in the way writers write in terms of poetry, and so that's something that you might want to peek at if that is not something that you remember. So week 6, notice I've got a couple paintings here. And notice here, Chicago, New York, St. Louis. This is highlighting what's called the Great Migration. So after a lot of the legislation that was passed to make African Americans more equal over, the first half of the 20th century, from the early 1900s into the 1950s, African Americans after the Civil War began leaving their agrarian homes after the Civil War ended and began the Great Migration, which is where they moved to big cities so that they could find work. Because many African Americans, once they had to be paid for their work, plantation owners did not want to pay them at all, or would pay them a pittance. And this is also when you see sharecropping becoming popular, which is where plantation owners try to continue to use what I like dub economic slavery, which is where they try to still continue to enslave and oppress African Americans by offering them little to no money and to sharecrop, which means that you can use my land and I get 90% of the money that we make off the crop and you get 10%, even though you did all the work and all I'm letting you do is use the land. So you see that a lot. So, this painting is really about that Great Migration. And if you notice in both of these, notice in the top one, African Americans don't have any faces. And think about how that's very symbolic. And then the next one, notice, these African American gentlemen climbing these stairs. Stairs are very, very symbolic to the African American community. And I know you've heard Life Ain't Been No Crystal Stair. It's a very popular poem. But stairs are very symbolic in terms of African Americans being able to climb in the ranks, climb economically, climb socially. But notice how big their eyes are. And thinking about how African Americans, their eyes were open for the first time in terms of awareness of how marginalized they were. You see a lot related to Jim Crow laws. There's some information on here. So for instance, Jim Crow laws are just basically laws that are aimed at oppressing African Americans or other minorities or, that sort of thing. And so, for instance, they would have what's called a paper bag test. And if they could put a paper bag up against your face, and if you were lighter than a paper bag, then you were allowed to do certain things. So these are some of the absolutely ridiculous laws that were going on after the Civil War that still oppressed African Americans. There's also an African American history timeline. And then there's the African Americans in the arts presentation, which talks about jazz, art, culture, that sort of thing. And that's narrated by me. So if you want to know more and need to know more about African American culture and rights and art during this time, those are there. And then your archetypal poster. Remember, you should have a link to a poster and a Google document. So you should have 2 links there. The Google document will contain your poster that explains and goes into detail what is on your poster. Your poster is informative. And posters are just a quick glance. Let me get the gist of your idea, and then I move on to the next one. And so once everyone submits theirs on the 17th, what I'll do, is I will compile them all in a thinking log, and then people will have 2 minutes to narrate their poster and just talk about their poster and what their archetype represents. We then have week 7, which is the women's movement. And I will introduce you to Project 2. During that week, I'll do another video. But this is a very popular painting by Picasso. And so it's, about women and, Picasso was a very popular painter during this time. So then there is also a women's rights timeline, and there are several videos. There's Ain't I a Woman, which is by Sojourner Truth. And the thing about women's rights is that women were actually on the cusp of advocating for their rights when the Civil War happened. And so women in the 40s and 50s were gathering to try to enact legislation. Abigail Adams is one of the big ones that her husband was president, who tried to get some legislation moving. But the women, as they gathered, decided that the higher, better cause was to get rid of the horrible institution of slavery. And so these women banded together and started meeting. But Ain't I a Woman is by Sojourner Truth, who is African American and a woman, and she advocates for both rights. in that video. And then we have Cicely Tyson, who was a prominent African American actor, and I believe she might still be alive and acting here and there. But very powerful, one of the first African American actresses to really break the color barrier in terms of being winning awards and getting very, very good quality roles. And then Kerry Washington, who you know from Scandal, who has also won a lot of accolades. But they perform that Ain't I a Woman video or speech. And so it's really profound, and it really sets the stage for women's rights. But the timeline talks a lot about women's rights. And, you know, today, currently, a lot of the women's rights discussion stems from labor and reproductive rights. And so on that timeline, you kind of see how long that has been going on and how, you know, as Americans and in America, we're trying to figure out how to fit those things into our democracy. So you see that. And then week 8 is modernism. So modernism's influences. Modernism was influenced by Freud, Marx, Nietzsche, and Darwin. If you don't have any idea who they are, I would suggest that you read this. Okay. Freud, if you remember, did psychoanalysis. A lot of people joke because they say that all Freud wants to talk about is sex, or the origin of everything is sex. That is the oversimplified version of Freud. Okay. So, access one of those resources. Marx concerned himself with social class when it comes to the working class or labor force. Nietzsche, his famous words are, God is dead. He didn't literally mean God is dead. It was very symbolic in terms of saying that religion no longer has a place in daily society. So you see a shift in terms of religion used to sort of control governments, control communities, control social norms, and that starts to change. And then you have Darwin, and Darwin's basic premise, if you need a sort of brainstorm here about Darwin, Darwin talked about evolution and how we adapt to our environments as a species, how all the species are interconnected, how we share some sort of common ancestor. And that's a lot of what Darwin talked about. So if you need to be familiar with them, I would scan through those documents because they are so important and influential to writers because they changed the way we viewed the world. And so those are very important. And then there's just an interesting link because we just celebrated 9/11. There's a controversy about the 9/11 memorial, and it just helps you think about sort of what encompasses this whole class, especially in thinking about World War I and World War II. So that's just an interesting piece. And then we end up at week 9 with test 2, and I'll go in and change those dates and so forth. So that's that for our first unit. Now I want to review, everyone should have grades. If you do not have grades, then you got feedback from me in your test. So you got feedback about your essays, your test essays, and you also got feedback either in your thinking logs or in the feedback section in your grade book. So everyone should have grades and kind of know where they stand. Now, the advice that I can give you on the essay, and I found 2 questions that were bad on the test. So everyone got back 6 points, 6-ish points. I think it's some sort of weird number. And so a few things that you guys need to remember. This is a 200 level class. It's going to be hard. It is a literature class. It's going to be hard. It was the first test. So it's going to be hard in general because you don't know what to expect. I try to prepare you as much as I can. Number 4, I'm sure a lot of people struggled because they didn't do all the readings. I know of 1 or 2 people who got their book late who were just behind. Now, in terms of the essay, I had a few people say, well, I don't know anything about the Bible. That was one of the things I referenced ahead of time in the study material, because whether you believe the ideas in the Bible or not, as a guide for life, the Bible is the #1 reference text and is still a bestseller. Okay, so the influence of the Bible is what we are looking at. We are not looking at Bible verses. I'm not telling you to believe in God. I'm not telling you to believe in Jesus. I'm telling you to be aware of how writers use things in the Bible to make a statement. Okay, and so again, that is up there for you. So if you don't know like Noah or Moses or Jesus, or the Great Flood. And look, the Quran has some of the same characters. The Book of Latter-day Saints, Book of Mormon, all holy texts have very similar sort of patterns. And that's where Freud and Jung kind of get their idea of the psychoanalysis that they do and the idea of the collective unconscious. So anyway, that's really, really influential. So if that was your struggle, those were things that were available to you. Another thing with the essay is some of you guys did not root things in the text. You needed readings. Okay, this is a literature class. So in order to say that, for instance, society used the Bible to control women, okay, you needed to show that in your readings. Okay, you needed something from the reading. A lot of you guys summarized. I mean, a quote, a line from a poem, whatever. Okay, so for instance, in Emily Dickinson's A Narrow Fellow in the Grass, if you did not make the connection automatically that a snake represents evil, aka the snake in the Garden of Eden, then you definitely need to review the biblical imagery. Okay, and that snake tends to be a universal symbol of evil. I just saw the Jungle Book this weekend, and Kaa in the Jungle Book. I mean, Kaa is very evil. Snakes represent evil. I mean, that's how pervasive it is that it's in children's cartoons and children's books, which is why you used a children's book for your archetype poster. So I would encourage you to do that. Now, in terms of your thinking logs, okay, number one, you should not be using any outside sources, okay? Because A, you have a brain, you're intelligent human beings, okay? With a little bit of work, you can read and you can dissect, okay? That's what those reading tasks are for, okay? Number two, some of you guys are just copying and pasting from like GradeSaver or Cliff's Notes. If you can write it and copy and paste it, I can find it online too. Okay. So that's a concern for me. That lets me know that A, maybe you're taking too many classes, B, you're not managing your time well, or C, you're just not taking the class seriously. Okay. It's 200 level class. Those are things that you should have gone over in English 111 and English 112. Okay. You do not copy and paste from any website without giving someone credit. If it's exact words, you put it in quotes. Okay, so those are things that you should know, but you do not need any outside sources for your thinking logs, nor do you need outside sources for instance, your test. Okay. Now, in order to say Barack Obama is the president of the United States, that's common knowledge. So if it's something that is well known, for instance, like the bombing of Pearl Harbor, it's pretty well known. Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Okay, that's been the only attack until 9/11 on U.S. soil. Okay. Those are common knowledge, but when in doubt, cite it. That's the advice that I would give to you. Okay. Now, for our new thinking logs, everyone should have found a partner. Okay. And I think I have it in week 4. Yep. It's in week 4, but I'll copy it if you want and put it in week 5. There's a partnership matching form. I call it Matchmaker, Matchmaker, Make Me a Match. Okay. If you don't know that song, it's from a very, very famous play. So anyway, so you should have kind of made a match, okay? Now, I just put a few things on there that you might want to know when you're matching with someone, So it's up to you. I'm not going to assign them. You guys, work that out on your own. But what you will do is you will come under here to where it says Thinking Log 2, go to the file and make a copy. Now, only one member of the duo needs to do that. Okay, so you go up to File, make a copy, okay? And then you're going to want to share it with your partner, which is why you have your email, or you will have this is why you have your email. Okay, so you're going to share it with your partner. Then you and your partner are going to work in this together. Okay, so notice down here, you're going to do one piece of literature for each of these. So you might do, 13 ways of looking at a blackbird in Ancient Analyzer. Okay. So one of you is going to make the original contribution and the other person's going to respond. Now, in your response, you can do a couple different things. If it's a question, you can answer the question. If it's an Ancient Analyzer, you can offer another analysis. If it's a critical connector, you can connect it to another piece of text during that week, because I group them this way because the texts are kind of related. Okay. All right. So those are things you can do. Aiming to do each of these. Okay. All right. And notice you're going to do it each week. So that's where you and your partner share. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh my goodness, what if my partner, gets in a car accident and we can't finish, okay? You'll still do this, okay? You'll just have to do it on your own. So you get graded for your contribution, okay? If something dire happens with your partner, you just need to email me and let me know, not to expect that to be filled out, okay? All right, so you guys agree. Now, I will emphasize, you do not have to be on at the same time, okay? So let me look at some partnerships. So I got Tiana and La Rochelle. So Tiana wants to get on at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning and do her part, okay? Then La Rochelle, who's asleep, can get on at 1 o'clock in the afternoon while she's at work, okay? You do not have to be in the document at the same time. Now, if that's what you prefer, that's fine. Look, group work on campus. If you want to do group work on campus, then you guys are more than welcome to get together, okay? I'm not stopping you, but this is an online class. All you need to do is meet in the document, not at the same time, okay? Okay, so when you turn it in, you will copy this, okay? Now, under week, I think 6, you'll put your link. So you've gotten to week 6 to put your link up here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and help you guys just like I did with all the other ones. And you're going to hit add submission. And you're going to click in it and you're going to control V or right click or whatever. And then you're going to hit save changes. Each member needs to do it. Okay. Because, it'll just be easier. Okay. This is not for a grade. This is for me to peek in and just see how you're doing. Now, later on, when you guys are done, you guys will turn it in. Okay. And that will be week 9. Okay. All right. So I'll fix those dates. Don't worry. Don't panic. Okay. They might be right, but just in case, I will double check them. So, okay. I would encourage you to look at the test essay tips. I'm also going to put some Think and Log tips. I've got a few samples from students who did really well. Okay. So I'm going to put those on there just so you guys kind of see what you're doing. I would say the biggest thing that you can change with your Think and Logs is just to provide more evidence from the text. I mean, some of you guys have made some great claims. One student was like, wow, Emily Dickinson uses such vivid language in her Much Madness is Divinest Sense. Great. Tell me what the language is. Tell me why it's so vivid. Tell me why big, isn't as vivid as huge or gigantic or Titanic, right? And tell me how that helps you figure out what her message is. Ultimately, what's that takeaway? What is she trying to say? And literature is interpretive. Emily Dickinson's not here to tell us what she meant, right? So we have to figure it out. Okay, it's kind of like being a CSI agent and figuring out who committed a crime. With my 6-year-old, it's figuring out if she's lying or not. And I'm pretty good. And I do my investigation. And I'm like, it wasn't that you didn't have enough time to eat. It's that you were talking, because I talked to your teacher and I saw on your dojo point, and then I noticed something else, right? Okay. So you're making a claim and you're supporting the claim. And that's why I don't encourage you to go online, because the people online are making claims too, but their claim could be not well supported. So with that in mind, do not panic. Do not freak out. As I said in my last email, you are learning and you are only going to get better at this class. Okay. So stay with me. I'm hoping to see some of you guys tonight during my virtual hours. I know Kevin has been. I think Cheryl has been. So 8 to 9 tonight. Get on and ask questions and make sure that you can clarify what you need. If that one doesn't work, we'll try to find some time other than that time to meet. Okay. But email me. I can't read your mind. I don't know what you might need until you guys tell me. So I hope all that information was useful for you. And I will be in touch in the think tank giving you some feedback. And I'm sorry this video was super long, but I think you guys kind of needed like the pep talk. So I hope all of it was helpful, and I'll see some of you tonight.